Quick question. What do you call a regional bloc that can't agree on a unified payment system, has 11 different regulatory frameworks, speaks hundreds of languages, and still somehow attracts more VC venture capital than Latin America?
I don't know. It sounds like you're going to tell me though.
Home. Southeast Asia. The long form of our name. Yeah, home.
It's perfect timing on talking about this because right now we have the what is it, the 47th ASEAN Summit
Mm-hmm.
happening in KL. Traffic is a nightmare for anybody that's trying to move around the city, but that's what happens when you have all of the region leaders coming in, including guys like Trump, the Chinese premier,
Yep.
whole bunch of
Carney.
dignitaries and their
Yeah.
posses coming along with them.
More people, more high stakes meeting right now, and even Singapore is also getting some as well. Like we are going to get Carney coming in, so everywhere, this region is getting hot. What we keep hearing is that ASEAN needs more integration, more unity, more alignment. And is it the real right prescription though? That's a question that hangs on my head.
I think we have a whole lot of fragmentation that's going around in the region, and I think we have some things that need to be addressed. I mean, it is hopeful that stuff comes out of these meetings. We have some trade deals, we have some peace agreements, we have things that are going to generally impact the Southeast Asia startup community. So I think we've got a handful of things that we can talk about in relation to this.
Spicy take, and we're going to defend it. We're going to look at it in the next 30 minutes. And I'm Kim, he's Kevin. And this is a Sea of Startups. And today we're talking about why controlled chaos may be Southeast Asia's perhaps biggest competitive advantage. So let's get into it.
Some context, as I said, 47th ASEAN Summit just happened in Kuala Lumpur. You have 10 of the countries, because Myanmar is not allowed to attend because of things that are going on there. Technically, an 11th because
Yeah.
this is when Timor-Leste was
Mm-hmm.
joined into it. Then, of course, you have a bunch of other dignitaries from US to Brazil to Japan to all over the place. So you had a lot of stuff going on. A lot to talk about in regards to regional cooperation, supply chain
Yep.
resiliency, digital economy frameworks. I'm sure there was some stuff in regards to semiconductors, rare earth minerals, lots of other stuff.
And here's what caught my attention. There was this recurring theme throughout the summit about how ASEAN is still young, still figuring what it means to be a unified bloc, still balancing national sovereignty with regional integration. And, this is literally the exact conversation happening in Southeast Asia's startup ecosystem right now. I mean, think about it. Seems like it's a trend that I have right now. I like to draw parallels to a lot of things. So this is one of them. And the way I see it is as though, to a certain extent, C is going through not midlife crisis, but maybe existential crisis.
Do me a favor, unpack that for me. What's going on here with ASEAN?
Yeah, so like ASEAN is a political entity that is what 58 years old, midlife crisis age, typical. That's not ancient in a way, but from a country perspective, it's still pretty young. That's barely middle age in geopolitical terms as well. And the EU has decades more to figure out integration. And ASEAN is still in that awkward phase whereby you're too big to be ignored, but not quite confident about what you want to be when you grow up. You know what I mean? Like stuck in the middle, middle child syndrome maybe.
And so you're drawing the parallel between that middle child syndrome to the startup community that we have going on here.
Yeah, startup is like ambitious, like more like ambitious 20s, it knows what it wants to be relevant globally. It has a population 680 million people, third largest market in the world. It has economic momentum, combined GDP crossing 4 trillion. So I'm gonna let that sink in for a bit, but it's still figuring out the identity question. Are we a free trade bloc, a security alliance, a diplomatic counterweight to China and the US? Again, stuck in the middle. That's another parallel here.
As a bloc, ASEAN is kind of stuck in that middle, trying to figure out where's its roots. I mean, for the most part, there hasn't been a whole lot of cooperation, not very much tangible that has
Yeah.
necessarily come out of it over these years. And in
Yeah.
all honesty, Southeast Asian startups, we could argue the same, also underperforming its potential, especially recently, considering the declines in funding and some of the scandals that have happened that have kind of bumped us
Yeah.
off of our track.
A few actually. Even in the last few episodes, we're talking about the funding winter that has impacted Southeast Asia, and is rippled through this way in many to greater impact. And with e-fisheries from Indonesia, that's quite a bit. That Southeast Asia is taking a hit actually, and you think about it, we are still figuring out whether are we ready to go global, or what's our product market fit, like unit economics and operational complexity across fragmented markets. I mean, even churning out unicorns, we're not doing that great. I mean, there are a few notable ones, but it's like more like a hit and miss. I think there's still opportunity. I'm not being very pessimistic about it. There's still some growth in it. When there's challenges, there's growth. That's what I try to tell myself every day. Um,
The challenges that ASEAN as a bloc face, there needs to be more integration. But like, I'm obviously not born and raised here. I've been living here for some time, so I have observed it. But then the question always comes down to like, what type of integration do they really want? What kind of integration does it need? To be honest with you, I don't see the likelihood of an EU style integration, nor should they do a unified currency. There are avenues like there was a photo session like a few weeks back of I think talking about integrating payment rails, all of the national QR codes that they have to make them interoperable. They've been talking about a lot of these things for a long time. So like there's a little bit of like a here we are again
mm,
symptom that comes out of it. But
yeah.
when you look at the global trends, so I'm going to go off on a slight bit of a tangent here, but one of the views that I have is because of a lot of the geopolitics that have come on, one of which is the trade deal that was struck between Malaysia and the US as one of the side signings that happened over this. But
Mm,
part of what's happening with the changes in trade, I think, is going to drive, or hopefully should drive, more inter-ASEAN trade, because
mm,
trade is very fungible. If you're having challenges with one trading part, trading is very fungible. You can start shifting the balances towards
yeah.
other markets. So I would love to see more inter-ASEAN trade, and I would love to see the markets trying to make that what that looks like in practice easier and more seamless. Payments is obviously a part of that, but then you have regulation, you have a number of other aspects. So it would be nice to have a trade block
Yeah.
as part of this. That may end up making it easier when we start thinking about the regulations around digital economy, digital taxes, all of these sort of things, um, more predictable.
Yeah. But then again, almost every country is so fragmented. Like each country is just so embedded in their own culture. Like for example, Thailand. There's so much of innovation going there, but because of its language, it's hard to get things moving as well, right? Like Indonesia as well. Regulatory wise, maybe not as strong, maybe not as robust. So it's hard to get things going. And again, being in Southeast Asia, it's a very relationship based economy to an extent. So how do you actually find that unity across these countries? That would be my question.
It's true if you did the Europe comparison in regards
Yeah,
to like if we're going off of the characteristics and the personalities of the countries, like
yeah,
take Germany, which is very sort of structured,
mm,
uh, very sort of like process. Let's make it operate like machinery. And then you go anywhere in the south of there, like whether you're talking like Spain,
Spain.
France, Italy,
Yeah,
it's much more chill and relaxed. Like, don't worry, it'll get done. And
yeah,
so from like personality wise, they have a lot of history. I mean, they fought multiple massive wars all across the continent, so they have a lot of like, they have a lot of backstory to them. But mind you, I don't think like my personal opinion is that the EU has done a number of things wrong. in
Mm,
regards to the integration, but creating a
mm,
trade bloc, it doesn't have the complicated geography because for the most part it's entirely connected by land. Dealing
mm,
with the archipelago of Philippines and Indonesia creates a
yep,
whole new level of complication.
yep,
But if we can just if we can just come to terms that trade is going to happen more inter-ASEAN, then it is necessary for them to start taking all of these steps. So hopefully there's more announcements coming as more of those
yeah.
conversations lead to things that are actually more tangible and not just kind of MOUs and handshakes.
Could be potentially, and I hope so. I mean, maybe fragmentation could be a feature. Maybe what
Mm.
looks like weakness is actually the training ground that creates a bit more most adaptable companies and the most resilient ecosystem. I mean, if you think about it, Grab has been with us for 12 years now, right? Like, it's been 10 years. It's not long, but at least they're still going through the marathon. They're not sprinting. They're still reinventing themselves. And Grab is one of the most successful apps within this region. I mean, within even Latam or who comes to this region, the first thing they know is like, oh, do you have Grab? And you see that happening, especially in Singapore as well. Even these
If
companies
only
don't
Grab
even
made
just
money.
yeah.
And
I
then
guess they couldn't grab.
they finally turned a profit, but like at least these stock prices up. Grab is still way down from where they came on.
Oh man, it
But
took a long
it is true that they're ubiquitous across the region. So like if
yeah,
you're traveling in, if there's an app
yeah,
that you need to download, it is the Grab app because you need it for
yeah,
the transportation. So
yeah,
I give you that, but like
yeah. It's
financially, I'd probably question it unless you were one of the earliest of investors.
I didn't really make much out of it. I invested in it, but oh well. But C
Yeah.
took a bit of time though. I got disappointed. I got burnt a bit, but now it's like, oh, it's picking up again. But still, we need fast. We need it to be fast. If it's going to be Southeast Asia, the main ecosystem for startups, it's going to be fast, man. Like they won because they learned to build around friction. They got good at navigating 11 different regulatory systems, 10 different payment structures and hundreds of cultural linguistic nuances. So in that sense, I'll give it to them. So the argument would be dealing with chaos makes you anti-fragile then?
I would say that's true. I mean, there's the kind of the joking statement that the strongest trees are grown in the toughest soil. So
Mm, wise
there
words.
is an aspect that if it's too comfortable,
Yeah.
if it's too predictable, then
Yeah.
that's not the place where innovation and durable companies are born and bred. So you need a little bit of the chaos in order to survive.
Then my next question would be, look, Silicon Valley has been there for years now. It's pretty stable in a way, and still there are still many fantastic startups coming out of it compared to Southeast Asia, whereby if you talk about controlled chaos, then why is it that Southeast Asia isn't churning as many startups as Silicon Valley is? That would be my
So I would
yeah,
make the argument on Silicon
yeah,
Valley, and it's a unique characteristic, so it's hard to replicate what was
okay,
created there. But I would argue in relation to the being too comfortable, that
mm,
that's the story of why Google started off behind in AI, even though
okay,
everyone was basically coming from there, because they ended up getting too comfortable.
mm,
You have on staff masseuse, you have all of these perks. You have people that joking about how they're making massive amounts of money but yet barely working.
mm,
So that got too comfortable. But for the rest of the startup community, it's
right,
extreme paranoia because it is hyper competitive because everyone is super smart and everyone is building and everyone is doing incredible things. And
right,
so like it is this sort of like hyper competitiveness. And you walk down the street, you go to your neighborhood bar, and next thing you know, you're sitting next to the guy that built Google Maps or like did this awesome thing or this awesome thing. So you're constantly in this like discomfort because you feel like an imposter sitting next
right,
to all of these amazing people. So that it creates a chaos in and of itself that
right,
drives
right.
that motivation. We
So
can't
it's
recreate
yeah,
that here,
yeah.
but it has that sense.
So it's to the other end of the extreme that the chaos it's way chaotic because of its hyper competitiveness is what you're saying.
And to be honest with you, I'm kind of of the view that comfort is the enemy of innovation
Mm.
because innovation happens when you don't like what you already have. You want something better. If you're
Yeah,
too comfortable, you don't have that urgency to
yeah,
create something even better. And
that's
so
true.
the discomfort can come in many different shapes and forms.
Hmm.
But it always kind of comes back to that saying of chips on shoulders put chips in pockets.
That's true. I mean, at the risk of sounding like a devil's advocate, though, like I had a friend who recently spent about a month in San Francisco, and
Mm.
the feedback that I got from her was she feels that the people that she has met so far are pretty much cookie cutter, which is pretty contrary to what we just spoke about. So I'm just thinking, because apparently the people whom she's met have like the same books, talk the same. It's like, where's the differentiation in these people? She's been wondering, and apparently, um, there's this book called what's the name? Anne Grant, is it? That Atlas Shrugged, that the author.
Ah, and
It's
and Ren,
Anne
yeah,
Grant.
yeah,
That's the book in Silicon Valley. So I'm like thinking,
because it's very libertarian.
yeah, yeah. I
I,
mean,
I've,
again,
I,
I'm
I
just
read I
yeah,
read it in my younger days when I was
yeah.
becoming indoctrinated into the libertarian belief system.
Yeah,
Um,
and she was quite frustrated. She was like, she didn't know what to make out of the trip when she went over. I mean, again, I stand corrected. Here I am. I'm just pointing out contrary viewpoints, is what I'm saying. A bit of a tangent there. But anyway, so Malaysia just announced they're hosting the ASEAN Summit right now, specifically designed to address cross-border scaling barriers while respecting that each country has different strengths and constraints. And that was the MOSTI announcement, right? The Ministry of Science, Tech, and Innovation. It's quite funny how they term it MOSTI of all things.
I mean, Cradle is underneath is underneath that ministry. I
Yeah.
think they're one of the ones involved, or maybe it's separate. But like, I'm gonna throw out my somewhat controversial viewpoint because
Mm.
we always seem in this never-ending stream of government-run events. And
Yeah.
there's a bunch of them that have been going on, and there's a bunch of them that are up and coming. To me, it's basically like it's just a bunch of marketing. They're
Yeah.
really trying to push out a marketing agenda without actually doing the effective things that it's needed to build the ecosystem. So who
Yeah.
are you trying to market to? The rest of the world? To try and say, hey, we're actually not doing that bad?
Yeah.
Because to be honest with you, like when you get under the hood of the apparatus that is supposed to be encouraging the startup ecosystem, could be doing a lot better.
I think a lot of I'm still on a wait and see approach still. I mean, for this year, it seems like a lot of things are coming out of Malaysia. Malaysia is the chair of
Sure,
ASEAN.
yeah, yeah.
So Anwar is coming up. I mean, Anwar, to his credit, he has done some good things. Yeah, there's no perfect government, right? So there's
Yeah.
one way to look at it. He's trying his best. I'm not gonna say no, but Cradle, stand corrected. Maybe hopefully this could change their direction. The winds could change, but let's see. I mean, if you can operate, across these boundaries without strong debate or a strong
Yeah.
opposition, then I think I'm just gonna wait and see. But I can see where you're coming from. I'm gonna be a good cop here and say, let's see how it goes.
No,
Yeah,
it's not that I don't want to see something
yeah,
happen. I've just become a little bit jaded because too many consistent number of events that
yeah,
get put out and then there's little follow up, and it
yeah,
just ends up becoming a reason for photo ops.
yeah,
But that being said, like there is an opportunity in order to try and take the lead and try and push for more regional integration. And the reason why I say that, if we truly want to build large tech companies, we have to be of the understanding that no single market within Southeast Asia is sufficiently big enough to be an end destination. Indonesia may have been the exception, but to be honest with you, that bubble burst and it kind of proved that it really wasn't at the time.
yeah,
The hype said that it was, and maybe someday it will be because 300 million people, but it isn't
yeah,
really presently.
yeah,
And so, inevitably, we need to be looking at being regional, multinational by the default assumption. And in order to do that, we need more integration across the region. In my view, I think the major cities have more in common amongst themselves than when you start going from the major cities to some of the rural areas within their own countries. There's probably more characteristics that are similar between Kuala Lumpur and Bangkok from like business, what's the needs, the consumer habits, what are the types of technologies that they're ready to adopt and willing to adopt versus saying Kuala Lumpur to Alor Setar or sorry, that was just the name that popped into my head. But like from a tier one city regionally to
Yeah.
a tier two or tier three, there's generally more in common amongst the tier one. But we have to deal with the fact that we have all of this differences in regional, the borders, the cultures, the processes. But there's a lot more in common if we scratch below the surface in regards to stage of development of those tier one cities, the buying personas for many of these, especially in the area that I focus on, which is B2B. There's a
Mhm.
lot more commonalities when we focus on those top tiers.
And so, how do we then try to integrate that? Like, Malaysia isn't alone on that one. Vietnam has industrial policies explicitly targeting semiconductor manufacturing and EV supply chains with startup incentives baked in. Thailand, on the other hand, has the Eastern Economic Corridor, which is essentially a government built startup ecosystem for advanced industry. So they are on their own trying to set the stage that benefits them. But where do you find that line of commonality that they can overlap? Because when you talk about tier one, tier two, how it's good that there's an overlap there, but how do you match that? How do you marry them both? Because at the end of the day, to a certain extent, there's always going to be that comparative advantage. There's going to be a competitive advantage as well. How do you marry them both that benefits both?
From my standpoint, I think from the starting point, every country is going to try and pursue their own interest.
Yeah,
Um, But in all honesty, there's fewer examples of countries that have successfully been able to manage and pick winners and
yeah,
be the sole source of support as a standalone versus countries that have allowed the markets to actually operate and allow the innovators to be the leaders and the private sector
mm-hmm.
to be the one that carries it forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look more at well, obviously U.S. There's some background with DARPA and the U.S. government, but for the most part, the real kind of turning point was private sector. I mean, you could look to say South Korea, but I mean, a lot of the history of their corporate environment already had ties to it, to where it was basically a very familiar territory that just needed a flip of a switch to
Yeah,
gear over towards something new.
yeah,
Singapore is very government led as well. It's a good example, but it's very hard to replicate. And so, in all honesty, I think that the governments have a large role in regards to being supportive and
yeah.
providing, say, regulatory sandboxes and providing some grant funding. I would caution that being overly involved can end up being counter effective. And I think that's probably the instance that you see in the country that I call home presently.
I can see that. So, do you think then the myth of purely private sector innovation is just, well, a myth, and the reality is that most major technological breakthroughs involve some combination of government funding for, like we spoke about earlier, basic research, industrial policy for scaling, and private capital for commercialization. So, what does this mean for Southeast Asian founders then?
I'm not trying to say no to all government
Yeah,
funding.
yeah.
I think there
I
always
know.
needs to be some. Um,
Yeah,
where I'm drawing the line is that government funding is intended to fill in the gaps where the private sector is not or will not. And a lot of that falls into the more deep tech or deeper research areas. Most of the things that are low hanging fruit are not necessary for the government to support. What the government can do in those instances is to try and work on removing the frictions from a policy standpoint.
yeah,
So, from an ASEAN standpoint, the countries that rank highest on ease of doing business, where you have good legal systems, where you have good regulatory policy, those are the areas on the ease of doing business where you could look at like a Singapore to help come and take the lead. Malaysia generally ranks pretty highly on it as well relative to the region. So there's some of these areas to where the region could try and come together and say, hey, let's try and streamline this to where we can make it easier for your companies to do business with ours and easier for our companies to do business with yours, because we need that interregional trade, whether it's physical goods or digital.
Interdependency. Then we do need it.
Yeah, I don't know if I would use the word dependency, because there can be
Mm,
negative connotations that in regards to that, but deepening the interrelationship.
right. Yeah. True. Then again, everyone to a certain extent would have to play their role, right? They have to be intentional about how they want to navigate the fragmentation, and you can't just stumble hoping that for the best. Which brings me to us back to the idea of startups have to be thinking regionally then and acting locally, because the winners are the founders who have a regional vision. They understand that they're building for not just their country, but for the region, 680 million people. But they also have to have the operational discipline to execute locally in ways that are nuanced, culturally, regulatorily, that's a mouthful, and economically appropriate for each market, right? And it requires a very specific kind of team, and you can't just have a bunch of people from one country trying to run operations in 10 countries. You need local operators who understand their markets deeply. So everything, the way I see it as well, is that any startup who wants to thrive in this region has its regional focused. It's not just one country focused. And where do they go to? It's again back to Singapore, because the ease of doing business, the ease of, but Singapore can't be used as a test bed for it to be successful, because Singapore has everything that's ready, right? To some extent, it's in a way the Silicon Valley of Southeast Asia, whereby everything is too comfortable. Yeah, that's how I see it.
It is quite comfortable. Everything works, everything functions, everything's it's just a lot more expensive.
Yes, I
Um,
can't deny
but
that.
it is sort of exciting, because like it's the home of all the holding companies.
Yeah.
Because the legal system is predictable, it's reliable.
Mm-hmm.
There's decades upon decades upon decades of very much of a black and white. It all fits inside the box. So from like, if you're dealing with larger sums of money, it just puts that extra care. But there is enough room to play for the rest of the regions, because from an operation standpoint, as you scale up across the region, we still have nuance in regards to go to market. So having local teams, having remote offices, having teams that are spread across the region, that becomes more and more so the deeper that we can end up getting these interrelations. And like I said, I think the major cities have more in common with themselves, outside of the language and some of the cultural. But in regards to like stage of development and some of the other characteristics, then you get outside of the major cities.
And this is why the Borderless team concept is so important in C. Grab's leadership team includes people from Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Vietnam. C Group has folks from Singapore, China, Taiwan across the region. That diversity isn't just a nice to have, it's operationally necessary. And the flip side of it is that it can be a bit difficult, tricky, when you still have visa restrictions, different employment regulations, and cultural norms that don't always translate. And then again, on the flip side of it is that's why you have remote teams like How Deal is doing so well with its new valuation, and all their team members are working remotely. That's another example to take. And on the flip side is that in Singapore, people they are trying to enforce going back to office again. So it's like, doesn't really, why are you trying to imply here? It can be a bit confusing too.
All those Singaporeans just need to come on over to KL. We're at a discount. We've got all the same stuff.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, just all the Singaporeans, just come apply for your visa. Malaysia's nice. KL's great. Just come
yeah.
on over.
Contribute to the economy, right? Like three times, right? Why not? Everything is
Yeah,
cheaper.
yeah, yeah. I
It,
may sound like a downer on KL sometimes when I'm skeptical of some of the things that are going on there, but it's only because it's coming from a place of care. I
Yeah.
still think I still think that it's a fantastic place. So I do encourage people to pack their bags and save on rent by coming to Malaysia.
Yep, that's one way to put it. So, that's really one way to put it. I mean, but to be very frank, the food's better in Malaysia. Just saying. No, nothing said.
We're all of a sudden going to spark controversy. We're going to get so much hate mail. How can we just sparked the food wars?
I mean, food wise, I dare say a lot of people have agreed that food wise, Malaysia kind of takes the win. Uh, yeah,
Especially if you throw Penang into it.
yeah,
The
yeah.
moment that you actually are there and you go through it, it's hard to replicate that.
Exactly. Anyway, so what are we trying to let's be honest, yeah, what is the direction that we're trying to get at? If you're a founder listening to this, what's the tactical takeaway then?
So the takeaways from this, I guess,
Yeah.
from my standpoint, is you need to make sure that you're studying the different policies across the region, understand what different governments across the region are prioritizing, so that you
Yeah.
can understand what and where you can stack advantages. Uh, that's probably first and foremost. When you come off of the default assumption that you need to be regional at minimum, you
Mhm.
need to understand those policies and how they interact with the business that you have.
And we got to recognize that, like, as is everything else, like life, this is the long game. Grab took 12 years to get to where they are. C Group took 10 years. Building a regional champion in Southeast Asia is not a 5-year venture back sprint. It's a decade plus marathon. I mean, again, the times are a bit different right now. It's a different decade altogether with AI now. Maybe things may speed up a bit. I mean, just in 1 week, so much things have happened within the AI space. Um, what's that with ChatGPT? Atlas. Atlas is a new
Mm.
Google browser now. That happened in just a week, and then Claude has its own um the coding in Claude is so much better than ChatGPT, OpenAI now. So that's one more take. And Bolt is another new vibe coding app that I've also been trying out apart from Lovable. So there's so many things happening. So I don't know if the long game is the right word right now because everything is happening blink of an eye. But then again, industrial policy as well, right? And government support are still important. I don't think that will go away because these are the bedrocks of each nation. Because if you're playing a 10-year game, patient capital has to be there, and governments can provide that in ways that traditional VCs often can't. So we're going to bring it all together right now. What's the narrative that we are actually telling uh, the people who are listening?
The narrative is go regional.
Okay.
That's basically it. And why not celebrate some of the chaos? There is an aspect that some of the complexity is the competitive moat. That's the
Yeah.
reason why you don't see a lot more of the Western tech being dominant.
Mm-hmm.
They've tried to come in, they haven't always been able to figure it out. There's still a lot of room to grow for local players, so take
Mm-hmm.
advantage of it before it's gone.
Before we go, but rapid fire tactical takeaways for founders. Okay.
Study the policy, borderless
Yeah.
teams, design for interoperability, not necessarily uniformity, and embrace the long time horizons. And lastly, sometimes you do actually have to engage with the government. It's not
Mm.
always easy, but oftentimes you do need to do it.
Yep.
God,
And
celebrate chaos.
yep. Controlled chaos though.
Hopefully controlled.
Yep.
Sometimes not always.
Yeah, I mean, provided there's good food, then it will be controlled anyway.
There you go.
Southeast Asia is famous for that. So anyway, all right, that's the episode. If your brain hurts a little, good. This means you're thinking harder about what it actually takes to build in Southeast Asia.
And if you're heading to any of the Startup ASEAN Summit or any of the other events that are going to be happening, we'll probably see you there, or at least around KL.
So next episode, stay tuned, and until then, stay strategic, stay regional, and remember.
What looks like chaos is just Southeast Asia building its own operating system.
But anyway, thanks for
Yeah.
listening. Thanks for listening to Sea of Startups, and
All right. We'll see you next time.